It was a quiet Thursday morning in Seattle. The rain tapped lightly against the glass walls of the gates. Foundation's 42nd floor, conference room. Bill Gates sat alone at the far end of the long table, a half-eaten blueberry muffin next to his untouched coffee. His laptop screen glowed dimly in the gray morning light, casting a soft reflection of his weary face. At 69, Gates had learned to ignore most emails that didn't come through his assistant. But this one was different. Subject: they remember what you forgot. No sender. No trace. He hesitated for a second, then clicked. A single line appeared. 15 years ago, in Karaj, you promised something. They're still waiting. He stared. A name from the past flared in his mind, but the memory refused to settle. He closed the laptop, but the sentence wouldn't leave. That afternoon, during a routine press event about global nutrition, a young Iranian-American journalist stood up. She was nervous but deliberate. Her badge read Roxanne Mayer, BBC Persian. "Mr. Gates," she asked, voice steady, "do you remember Karaj?" Bill blinked. "Karaj?" he repeated. 2009, she continued. "You visited Iran unofficially to assess rural tech infrastructure for your foundation. You made a promise to a clinic director in Karaj. His son still works there." The room went silent. Bill swallowed hard. That was a long time ago. "I don't remember the specifics." She didn't back down. "They remember. He says your silence almost cost lives, that you pledged a satellite-based diagnostic system for their remote clinics, and then disappeared." He felt the burn of cameras zooming in. "I'm afraid I'll need to look into that," he said, shifting uneasily. "Thank you." The conference ended early. Back in his office, the rain had returned. He closed the blinds and pulled up the Foundation's internal archive. His hands trembled slightly as he typed, "Karaj Vetizin medical outreach." The screen flickered. A folder popped up, "Field Karaj draft unverified." Inside, photos he hadn't seen in years. One of him, kneeling beside a young boy in a small concrete clinic. Another, shaking hands with Dr. Abedin Nouri. There was even a note from Bill himself. "Deploy beta version of SRS diagnostics within 9 months. Prioritize Karaj region." His mouth went dry. He hadn't just made a vague promise. He had issued a commitment with his own signature. And it had never been fulfilled. He leaned back, stunned. All this time he had spoken about integrity, global health, transparency. And yet here it was, something forgotten, buried, and now resurfacing. His phone buzzed. It was Melinda. He let it ring out. Then he stood up, walked to the window, and stared at the city below. The weight of years, of choices made and forgotten, pressed down on his shoulders like fog. That night, Bill couldn't sleep. He wandered the halls of the Foundation alone. In the quiet, empty corridors, memories began to rise. Of a boy named Beruz, of laughter in a dusty courtyard, of a promise whispered over tea and dust and idealism. And now? Now the world would ask why he forgot. The studio lights didn't flicker, but something in the atmosphere shifted. Bill Gates leaned slightly forward in his chair, hands clasped, still radiating the calm authority he was known for. But the young woman across from him, Celia Monroe, had the kind of presence that wasn't taught in boardrooms or polished on TED stages. It came from something deeper, something lived. She adjusted her glasses and looked him in the eye. "Mr. Gates," she said slowly, "what you just said wasn't entirely true." The audience gasped lightly, not out of outrage but uncertainty. Was this a slip-up? A misinterpretation? A clash of data? Gates gave a slight nod, inviting her to continue. "You claimed earlier that vaccine patents were opened up for low-income nations," she said. "But as someone who worked on the documentation of the COVAX distribution index, I know that many of those countries received only partial formulas, and only after months of delay." Now it was quiet. "You opened the door," she continued, "but you kept the keys." Gates's expression tightened for a brief second. It was the kind of moment that PR teams prepare for endlessly, but even they wouldn't have predicted this angle. "I understand where you're coming from," he began slowly. "But the situation on the ground was far more complex than people realize." Celia didn't flinch. "I was on the ground, sir." The moderator looked from one to the other, unsure whether to step in. Gates took a breath and then did something unexpected. He didn't double down. He didn't pivot. He asked, "What would you have done differently?" Celia didn't hesitate. "I would have sent people before papers. Transparency before technology. And most of all, I would have trusted local scientists instead of waiting for Western consensus." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Several panelists shifted in their seats. Some nodded. The tension wasn't confrontation anymore. It was transformation. Gates looked at her, truly looked at her. And for the first time that evening, he said nothing. Because silence in that moment was the most honest answer he could give. The studio lights dimmed briefly during the commercial break. The hum of production crew footsteps and distant applause signaled that the live broadcast would resume shortly, but inside the panel room the air was heavy, not from tension but revelation. Bill Gates stood off to the side, one hand resting on the back of his chair, the other holding a small index card he hadn't read from once all night. Across from him, Celia Monroe sipped from a water bottle, her posture relaxed, but her eyes still locked on Gates. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was respectful. She had said what needed to be said, and he had listened. "Mr. Gates," she said quietly, just before they went back on air, "I know you think this is personal. It's not. It's structural." Bill turned toward her. "I think it's both." She raised an eyebrow. "That surprises me." He offered a small smile. "I used to believe ideas change the world. Now I think listening does." Cameras flicked back on. The moderator reintroduced the panel. "We're back with Bill Gates, Celia Monroe, and others discussing post-pandemic accountability and innovation. Ethics, Mr. Gates, any final remarks?" Gates straightened. "For years I believed that solving problems required scale. And maybe it still does. But I forgot that scale without intimacy leads to blindness. I forgot what a single voice can mean when it echoes truth." Celia glanced sideways, caught off guard. Not by the words, but by the tone. He wasn't defending. He was confessing. "I don't have all the answers," Gates continued. "But I know this. Our best data is worthless if it's divorced from the people. It's meant to serve." For the first time all evening, the audience clapped, not for a legacy, but for humility. When the segment ended, Celia didn't move. Neither did he. It was Celia who finally stood up and extended her hand. "Thank you for staying in the room," she said. Gates took it. "I wasn't always good at that," he admitted. "No one is," she replied, "until they are." And with that, they walked off stage. 2 generations. 2 visions, 1 unspoken agreement. Truth matters more when shared. The studio had fallen into a heavy hush. Not silence. Exactly. But the kind of electric stillness that settles when something real begins to break through the noise. Celia remained upright, her shoulders squared. But her earlier fire had cooled into something. Quieter, like an ember refusing to die. Opposite her, Bill Gates was no longer the composed executive defending policy. He looked human, tired perhaps, but deeply present. The moderator, visibly shaken by the intensity of the moment, didn't speak. The control room's voice whispered through Bill's earpiece. 10 minutes left. If you want to land something, this is it. Bill didn't nod. He simply leaned forward and said, "Celia, there's something I've never told anyone on camera." Celia tilted her head slightly, surprised. "When I was 16, I used to spend hours in the garage. Writing code, soldering boards, reading manuals I barely understood. I thought that's what made me who I was, my curiosity. My need to create." He paused. His voice caught just slightly. "But then my mother got sick. Pancreatic cancer. It moved faster than we did. I stopped building, stopped dreaming. For almost a year, I didn't touch a single circuit." You could hear the click of a pen in the audience. The weight of the confession pulled the room inward. "I didn't come back to it because of ambition," he said. "I came back because one person, a teacher, told me, 'Bill, you don't get to give up. Not when the world is broken and you know how to fix things.' I still don't know why she believed in me, but she did." Celia's face softened. Her mouth parted slightly, the faintest reaction breaking through the wall she'd maintained. "You remind me of her," Bill continued, his voice now steady. "The same unfiltered honesty, the same refusal to stay quiet when something feels wrong. It's not a flaw, Celia, it's a gift, one you shouldn't waste." He looked down, then back at her. "But if you spend your whole life fighting shadows, you'll forget how to build light." The audience let out a quiet breath. Celia lowered her eyes for the first time, not in submission but in reflection. When she looked back up, there was no hostility, just weight. "I didn't come here to destroy you," she said quietly. "I came here to test you, to see if anyone in your position could still feel something." Bill stood slowly. His face was unreadable for a moment, then softened. "I do," he said. "More than you know." He walked toward her, the audience watching, breathless. And then, in front of millions watching live across the country, he did something no one expected. He extended his hand. Celia stared at it. Her hesitation wasn't pride, it was disbelief. And then she took it. The interview was paused. Cameras stopped rolling. The silence in the studio was thick with tension. Bill Gates sat motionless for a moment. His eyes locked on Celia's. She hadn't flinched. Not when the world's most powerful philanthropist questioned her. Not when he brought up her family. And not now when the entire studio sat breathless. Then something shifted in Gates. It was subtle. His shoulders lowered a fraction. His breath caught in pride and certainty moments earlier. Now came a little slower, measured, human. "I don't think you realize what you just did," he said quietly. Celia raised her eyebrows, confused but unafraid. "I pointed out a flaw." "You did more than that," Gates replied. "You exposed a blind spot, not just in me, in the entire model we built." The studio watched as Bill Gates removed his glasses and placed them gently on the desk beside him. The gesture, simple as it was, carried weight. This wasn't the tech titan defending an empire. This was a man confronting a revelation. Project Horizon wasn't just a vaccine distribution network. It was supposed to be the framework for how we respond to pandemics globally. Efficient, centralized, predictable. But you reminded me today that human lives are not predictable. Variables in an equation. Celia blinked. Slowly. She hadn't expected this. Gates continued, voice steadier now. "We thought we could automate compassion. But what you said about your grandmother, how she was missed, because she didn't have an app, a barcode or a name on a list, that was real. And it hurts more than you know." A tear formed, quickly blinked away. Not from Celia, but from Gates. The moderator, clearly shaken, hesitated before asking, "Mr. Gates, what do you want to do now?" Bill looked at Celia again. "I want to listen." Celia opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "I want to take Horizon offline until we rebuild it," he said. "Not with code. Not with speed. But with stories. With people like her. We'll form a new advisory board. Not just engineers or doctors, but teachers, elders, community organizers. And Celia, I want you to be the first." The studio gasped audibly. Celia took a step back, uncertain if she heard him correctly. "Me? You spoke truth," Gates said. "That's all I ever asked of my data. Today it came from you." The broadcast resumed. The final seconds captured something no one expected, a handshake. Between a billionaire and a 17-year-old girl from Baton Rouge. The world watched. Not because it was historic, but because it was honest. And for the first time in a long time, people believed something might actually change. The applause had faded, but the weight of what had just happened still hung in the air. The studio, once buzzing with tension and spectacle, had turned quiet, almost sacred. Bill Gates stood alone at the edge of the stage, his silhouette outlined against the studio lights. His hands were resting on the podium, but his shoulders, they had dropped. Not in defeat, but in release, like a man who had just exhaled something he had held in for years. Celia slowly stepped toward him. The cameras were no longer rolling. The crew didn't dare speak. Even Steve Harvey stood still, his clipboard lowered, his mouth shut. When Celia stopped just a few feet from Gates, she didn't speak right away. She simply looked at him, studying the face of a man who once seemed untouchable. "You know," she said gently, "I spent the last 3 years wondering why people with power are so quiet." Gates nodded, his voice rough and low. "And I spent the last 3 decades convincing myself that silence was safer than truth." There was no audience response, no music, just the sound of a single human moment stretching open like a wound. "But silence isn't neutral," Celia said. "It protects someone. It always protects someone." He took that in. Then, almost hesitantly, he pulled a folded piece of paper from his inside jacket pocket. It was creased and worn. He looked at it for a long time before holding it out to her. "I wrote this last week," he said. It's my resignation speech. I was ready to disappear, to stop fighting, to just let the world think whatever it wanted. Celia took the paper but didn't open it. "Why didn't you read it tonight?" she asked. He looked her directly in the eyes. "Because you reminded me of the kid I used to be. The one who believed that ideas could save lives. The one who didn't calculate every word or weigh the political cost of caring. You reminded me of who I was before I started protecting the wrong parts of myself." Celia blinked, fighting emotion. "And what now?" she asked quietly. He took a step closer. "Now, I stop hiding behind systems, behind stock prices, behind protocols, and maybe, just maybe, I start listening. Really listening." She nodded. Then, surprising even herself, she handed him the paper back. "Don't throw this away," she said. "Not because I want you to quit, but because if you ever do it on a day when you've given the world everything honest that you had left." Gates smiled faintly, the kind of smile that comes when something old inside finally cracks open. He folded the paper once more and tucked it away. Steve Harvey walked forward and broke the silence. "Tonight, we didn't just witness a conversation. We witnessed something else entirely." He looked toward the camera and then back at Gates and Celia. "We saw a man come undone and a young woman stand up. And in that moment, maybe just for a second, power didn't look like money or fame or technology. It looked like truth and grace." As the lights dimmed, Gates extended a hand to Celia. She didn't shake it. She hugged him. The audience rose to their feet. And for the first time in years, Bill Gates didn't have the last word. He just stood there, quiet, humbled, and awake. The studio lights were dimmer now. The crowd had thinned slightly, but those who remained were still locked in. Celia sat upright, her hands folded on her lap, but her gaze no longer pierced like before. She looked tired, yet quietly resolved. Bill Gates took a sip of water and turned back toward her, not as an opponent, but as a man trying to reach common ground. "You asked me earlier," he began, his voice softer, "what the price of progress really is, whether data can account for faith, whether science can explain sacrifice." Celia didn't answer. She just listened. Bill placed a paper on the desk between them. A photo. It showed a small clinic in Mali, just one nurse, 2 solar-powered refrigerators, and a long line of mothers holding babies. The caption read, "Vaccine shelf life, extended by 72 hours, lives. Saved 9,234 and counting. I used to think that was enough," he said. "That numbers like this could speak for themselves. But you reminded me that people don't follow statistics. They follow stories. They follow courage." Celia looked down at the photo, then back at him. "You were right," she said. "We were never just talking about vaccines or science or strategy." Bill nodded. "We were talking about trust." Then she surprised everyone, including Bill. She stood slowly, turned to the audience. This debate was never about winning. It was about making sure someone was listening. She paused, her eyes welling up. He listened. The moderator, silent for most of the last hour, finally spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we witnessed here wasn't a debate. It was a reconciliation." The room stood as one, applauding, not out of victory or defeat, but out of something rarely found in televised discussions. Clarity. Celia turned back to Bill and extended her hand. "Not an apology," she whispered, "but a beginning." Bill smiled and took her hand. "No numbers this time," he replied. "Just people.